Everybody, and welcome to Leadership and Strategic Management. Today we're going to be talking about industrial espionage. Oops, I meant to say competitive intelligence. Stick around. This is episode 19 of Leadership Skills for Managers. I am Bill, the company's expert, if I can remember my own name, and that's my God-given name, and one would think that one would know it. Anyway, the title of this episode is called Inside the Secret War, How Competitors Are Beating You. And this is going to be an interesting one. What do I have to remember to do? I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. Oh yeah, a shout out as always goes out to my YouTube channel members. Membership has the privileges. My Patreons, my super thanks donors, so those are always nice to get. And to you, my viewers and participants, you guys are awesome. This is an interactive live stream, and I like to talk about business at least once a week on a live stream. So for the past few weeks, we've been doing this stream on Fridays. If you are a subscriber to my YouTube channel, you should be able to get in the chat. If you've been a subscriber for any amount of time, you should be able to get into the chat and ask me questions. We're going to cover a topic, and then I'm going to open it up for questions at the end, and possibly as we go, depending on how easy it is to stay on topic. I think that's all the public service announcements I have to I have to get through. Let's just dive in. Yeah, okay. So here we go. This is something I've never talked about before, not on YouTube. And the modern term for it is competitive intelligence, as in the competitive intelligence department. But I'm going to use the term industrial espionage because that's essentially what it is. Let's just call a spade, and let's talk about this. This is to do with business strategy, and I'm going to cover a couple of concepts if you are interested in getting into strategic business thought, the kind that you sort of need to direct long-term strategy if you're running a business unit or you're running a company. But sometimes the danger is you can get lost in abstract thought and you can't really come down out of the clouds. So that's always the danger with the stuff. But hopefully you'll pick up some tips along the way. Okay, so let me set this up. I was the CEO of a company once, and my approach to doing things is not very original. It's something that is championed by many people around the world, in particularly the Boston Consulting Group in the United States. Okay, they've been a proponent of this type of thinking that I'm going to be getting into for a long time. And it's based on something called PIMS, okay, P-I-M-S. It stands for the Profit Impact of Market Strategy. Okay, this has been around for a very long time, since the 1960s, actually. It was some kind of research project that started with General Electric. It was internal to General Electric. And then it's weird. I don't fully understand the history. It broke away from GE and it became an independent thing. It was acquired by a couple other companies who furthered the research, and then it became an independent thing again. Anyway, it was like a big study, and it involved a huge database. And it started out with people trying to find out what business strategies actually led to financial success. Okay, so it wasn't based on theories of how business works. It was simply, let's look at what people are trying to do, what they say they're doing, who they are, and what are their results? What are their financial results? Are they making money, right? Or are they not? And this started because the database had access to the tax returns of a lot of companies, so they could see their financial performance. It's not about what you say, and it's not about your theories. It's about how you're doing, okay? And then what they did is they looked at the type of company. Is it big? Is it small? Is it in one industry or the other? Is it a company that does 400 things in 400 industries, like a conglomerate? Or is it like a company that does one thing in one industry, meaning it's pure play, right? So they looked at all these things and they said, okay, we want to find out what actually leads to financial success and what doesn't. Okay. So that's what this was. And they analyzed all the data and they crunched it all. And they came to various conclusions about what stuff works and what stuff doesn't. Okay, so that's where this thing came from. As I say, it's called PIMS. And it's been taught in business schools for many, many years. And they came to a few conclusions. And they're pretty simple conclusions. For example, what they said was across all industries, all sizes of company, all types of companies, the thing that tends to lead to financial performance in the long run is quality. Okay, so if you're really good at doing whatever it is you do, you tend to make money. Now, that seems self-evident, but they went into some very specific definitions of what they mean by quality. And it's maybe not the quality you're thinking of. It's not like conformance quality, how closely something matches a specification. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something called customer relative perceived quality. This is the holy grail metric for me in my career. That's what I always shoot for. That's what many other people shoot for. Basically what it is if you go to your customers and you say, write down a list, the top 10 suppliers of this thing, okay? Producers of this thing, like it could be sandpaper, it could be video games, it could be entertainment, it could be chocolate bars, it could be whatever, like whatever we're talking about. Write down your top 10 in order of what you think is best. So number 1 will be the best chocolate bar or whatever, okay? And number 2 will be the second best chocolate bar, and so on. So give me your top 10, right? Now, that's essentially this thing called customer relative perceived quality, because it's asking how good something is. It's asking how good it is in relation to, what else is out there, right? And it's asking about it in terms of what you perceive makes it good. It could be price. It could be, like in the case of chocolate bar, it could be quality. It could be like taste. It could be, I don't know, how healthy it is. It could be how biodegradable it is. It could be the image of the company, whether they're involved in all kinds of scandals and caught doing all kinds of bad things. So whatever it is that you place emphasis on that makes something good to you, you use that system and rank, which is the best, right? So that's a metric called customer relative perceived quality. And as you can appreciate, it's a mixture of a whole bunch of different things. And, so things like marketing affect it, things like product quality affect it, things like price affects it, things like availability affects it. Many, many different things affect it. And the idea is that we're not going to dictate which one of those matter and which ones don't. The customer gets to decide, right? So it's like a sort of end result of like combining all those different variables, right? So that was the ultimate metric. How are you doing as a company? Well, ask your customers, write down a list of what's the top 10 suppliers of the thing you do and see if you're on there and see if you're number 1, because your goal should be to be number 1. Okay? Right. This is where we start this journey into our topic today, which is basically industrial espionage. Okay? Now, the key thing is that when you think about this metric and the idea that you're going to try and pursue the goal of being all your customers' number 1 choice, okay, that involves marketing, it involves product quality, it involves so many different things, right? And one of the elements there is that it's a relative measurement. It's not some kind of absolute measurement of how you're doing. It's a measurement of, how you're doing compared to your competitors, right? So it's like a relative measurement. So how your competitors are doing influences where you rank on that list. If all your competitors are crap, you're probably going to be number 1. But you could be doing the same thing, but it turns out all your competitors are amazing. they're probably not even going to be on the list, right? Because they're going to be occupying the top spots, right? So it's not an absolute thing about what you do. It's relative, okay? So let's fast forward a little bit. You guys have hopefully heard of Intel, the CPU manufacturer. They make chips, right? And their competitor, AMD, for many years, it was like Intel versus AMD, Intel versus AMD. And, it was almost like a religion, right? Almost like, PC, Mac, this kind of thing, right? I was very much in the AMD camp for many years, even when they were the underdog and, they were getting beat up by Intel quite badly. They had a CEO called Hector Ruiz, and he released a book something like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that. I actually got a chance to speak to him about it at the time. And he did an interesting thing. He was the CEO of AMD for a couple of years. He was an engineer, a guy who had a PhD in engineering, and he famously had this strategy where we're going to ignore what our competitor's doing. We're not going to base all our moves based on what Intel is doing, and we're just going to always be reacting to them. We're going to ignore our competitor, and instead we're going to really focus on the customer. And we're just going to give the customer what they want and focus on what they want and try and deliver, something that meets their needs the best. Okay. And that was his strategy. He was an engineer. He wasn't coming from necessarily the world of business purely, but that was his strategy. Anyway, interesting strategy. It goes against the conventional wisdom. And one could argue that is not the thing to do because it contradicts what we've been talking about so far. Customer relative perceived quality, that top 10 list, right? In order to score number one, you obviously need to pay attention to what your customers are doing, right? If they're coming out with a amazing new technology or something, you can get on the marketing horn and try and convince your customers that new technology, or that's not really where it's at now. That's passé. That's irrelevant. Where the action really is this other area over here, coincidentally, that you're leading in, right? Things like this. Okay? So the point I'm trying to make is that you have to pay attention to your customers as part of your business strategy. That's just how it goes. Okay? If you don't, then look out because there's a lot of traps you're going to fall into relatively quickly. That's my point. Okay, so I did a couple of videos a few years ago on this channel, and I think they're still up, where I talk about what you can tell about an employer or a company from the curb just by looking at their building, looking at their parking lot, things like this, the stuff that you can see externally. What does that say about the company? I'm sure everybody here can think of examples. For example, if you look at the company on a Saturday afternoon, maybe at 5 p.m. on a Saturday, and the parking lot's full, and the boss is there. Or maybe the boss isn't there, but yet the parking lot's full of workers. They're all at work on Saturday. What does that tell you? Now, depending on the context, that can tell you different things, right? But I'm sure you'll agree that's meaningful. Would you want to work at a place where, they work Monday to Friday, regular hours, but you go there on a Saturday, you drive by, everybody's in on the Saturday? What about if everybody's in on Sunday? What about if the boss is in on Sunday? What does this tell you? You go to one organization and they just built a new building, a new sort of facility. And it's all glass and it's all open concept. You can see all the people in their offices. You can see the boss in their office. There's no walls. There's no, compartmentalization, right? What does that tell you about the company? What's the opposite? And I've seen this before. You go and you look at companies that have full mirrors, like the glass that surrounds their building is all 100% reflective, like it's a perfect mirror. They don't want anyone looking in. They plant hedges and stuff between the building and the road, so you can't even see the building. They want to be hidden. They do not want to be seen. They do things that are special to be hidden so people can't see, paranoid. it depends on the context, right? So, what can you tell about an organization from the curb? What can you tell about, if they make products, taking the product apart, seeing what it's made of, seeing how it's made, right? They position themselves as like a premium brand product. You open it up, it's made out of Scotch tape and particle board and balsa wood, very cheap materials, very cheap assembly. What does that tell you? I'm sure you can see like how you could glean intelligence from this. And this is like obviously very basic stuff. Okay. Let me ask you something. And I'm going to open up to questions in a moment. Let me ask you something. Taking this thinking even further, okay? I'm basically saying that you can tell something about a company from the curb. Go a step further. Can you tell what the counter strategy would be to compete against that company from the curb? Would that be possible? I believe definitely the answer is yes. I mean, I wouldn't actually try and do that. You could be a huge margin for error there, but you definitely can. If you have multiple sources of intelligence, you're not just looking at them, what their building looks like, but you're getting information on them from other sources. You combine that with other information. Can you come up with an effective counter strategy to outmaneuver them? I would say yes, absolutely. And I'm not the only one. Okay, so that sets the stage for what we're talking about today, industrial espionage, and how it's done in the modern world and what companies are doing to outcompete each other and how they're making use of this as a tool. Before we get to the meat and potatoes of this, let's open it up for questions. Magic Beans is here. Magic Beans says, "Hi, Bill. Early in on your career, do you suggest working at NMCs, big companies or startups, small companies?" It's all good. It's all good. There's definitely something to be learned by working in like a multinational corporation, like a big enterprise environment. A lot of times, I would suspect that if you're the type of person that's going to do that, but you're also going to work in like startups and small companies, I would suspect the advantage of working at the big company is you're going to react against it. You're going to see how they do things, and then you're going to spot all the problems with it. And then what you learn or what you see at a startup or a small company is going to be a reaction against it. The reality is that a lot of big companies, they're doing a lot of things right, but those are less apparent usually when you're inside of them. Right? Because what you tend to see in front of you when you're working like in a workplace or whatever is you see the inefficiencies, you see the imperfections, the things that, are bad, right? Like, people don't communicate, people, operations are inefficient, or error prone, policies are silly, like whatever. That's what you're going to see right in your face. But, the advantages like economies of scale and what the history was, that they figured out how to do business and be very successful at it, so they grew to that size. The reasoning behind the decisions of how to do business, that's usually like hidden. That's usually in the heads of the executives and founders, if at all, if they still retain that. So yes, you could definitely do that. It's not a stupid idea. I would definitely. It's also good to get some credibility if you've worked at like a big, well-known company. That helps, right? But in terms of learning business, if you're on a business track, like kind of we're talking about here in this live stream, the real learning is in startups and small companies. That's where you really see actual business being done, right? So that's what I would say. Spellworks says 7535 says, "Can a job candidate with much weaker qualification?" That's about jobs. We're not talking about jobs here. This is about business. I'm doing a live stream later in an hour and a half where we're going to talk about job search. Anyway, okay, so let's get to the heart of the matter here. Okay, this is a live stream on essentially industrial espionage. Let's talk about what the modern term for this is competitive intelligence. Okay, that's what's called, competitive intelligence. So we've set up the need for understanding what's going on with your competitors, right? Not simply to outmaneuver them, to be able to stay one step ahead of them if possible. Not simply for that purpose, but when we look at strategically what is the best way to, the best strategy to adopt that will lead us to financial success, it's understanding things like customer relative perceived quality. So we establish that, and part of that is understanding that your customers are not judging you in an absolute terms. They're judging you against your competitors. So if you want to score higher on that metric, you need to understand what your competitors are doing, what they're thinking, what their plans are. Okay? Right. Okay. So here's something that a lot of larger businesses do. Now, this is done more in certain industries than others. Okay, but it's a thing. And what they do is they set up a department, usually a smaller department, called the Competitive Intelligence Department. Now, as far as I understand, there's no standard place in the org chart for this department. Sometimes they report directly to the CEO. Sometimes they're absorbed into the marketing department. Sometimes they feed, the operations and marketing department. Similar to the quality organization. Quality in a business is like this hierarchy that pervades every department. It impacts marketing, it impacts operations, it impacts finance, it impacts HR. I've seen, or I've heard of examples where they'll put their competitive intelligence department, similar to quality, they'll have it just pervade everything. Okay, so there's no standard place for this. In more paranoid companies where they've had a lot of organizational issues, they'll have that just report directly to the CEO. I believe the reason for that across the board is because then nobody can politicize this, the work of this department. They can't use it to play turf wars and all this kind of stuff. So it just reports directly to the CEO. There you go. Nobody knows what information that department is feeding the CEO. That's basically going straight to the CEO. It's not going directly to marketing or to operations or anything like that. Okay. Now, what this department does is its job is to understand what's going on with the competitors. That's its job. Okay. It's almost like some kind of covert, I don't want to say espionage operation, but that's really what they're doing. They're not doing anything illegal. They're just sort of looking at in various places, like places where, information is publicly accessible. And they're making a point to look at all these possible touch points where you could find out information on that company. And they're gathering it, they're synthesizing it, they're analyzing it, and then they're using it to predict, right, what's going on with that company. What are they working on? What are they doing? What are their plans? And that kind of stuff. What are their issues? And obviously things like trying to figure out what their weaknesses might be and where you might have a competitive edge, right? That's the purpose of that department, right? It's a way for certainly the CEO or the upper management to understand what their competitors are doing, so they never get caught with their pants down where your competitor comes out with like a killer product or some killer kind of bit of news that is like a real liability for you. That's the idea. Okay, I'm just going to finish this explanation and then we'll go over to questions. Okay, so that's the purpose of this department. Okay, now I've advocated for this actually. Depending on the size of your organization, depending on the details and the competitive landscape, I've advocated for this. And we're not talking about like a huge organization here. We're talking about like even something like an 8-person team. That's it. I wanted to, I'm just looking at, like, I didn't really put any real notes together for this, but I just threw some, like, a document that I had created, like, I don't know, 20 years ago over here, and I'm just trying to make sense of this. Okay, so to give you an example of what this department will do, there's various different areas, okay? One would be things like looking at public filings, like looking at patents they filed, okay? Import-export records, hiring data on LinkedIn, product teardown videos, analyst calls, vendor invoices, public-facing APIs if you're in that tech industry. Things like this, stuff you can, that's publicly available, just a matter of going and gathering that information, right? Okay. Reverse engineering. There's some types of reverse engineering that you can do legally, right? It's not illegal to disassemble somebody's product and see how it's made, We're not talking about stealing anything. This is just simply dismantling products, looking at, the materials, looking at the, if it's a product, it'll be manufacturing methods, things like that. Okay. What can you do? Are they using premium materials, premium methods, or are they using more economic methods and materials? Stuff like that. So these are different areas, like signals intelligence from the market. You're looking at the market. Okay. If you're doing trying to figure out how much your competitor is spending on advertising per se, right? Estimating, looking at what they're doing, estimating what their strategy is, how much they're spending. If they're doing hiring surges, this is where we've talked on this channel about, fake jobs and deceptive job postings and things, because a lot of this stuff are signals to customers or other stakeholders, a lot of times, I remember in the tech business, like 20 years ago, a lot of companies like Microsoft, they try and keep quiet, keep it on the down low about what they're working on, but then they'll post all these jobs and they're saying, we're looking for an expert on this, an expert on that. It's like, you can tell what they're working on, just by looking at their job postings, right? Things like that, looking at that sort of stuff, looking at the market. Human source equivalence. Now, there's stuff that you could do illegally, and there's stuff that you can do legally. And obviously, I'm advocating for only the stuff you can do legally, okay? People can talk to each other, and that's legal. You know what I'm saying? If you're not breaking any confidentiality agreements and stuff like that, it's perfectly legal. So, for example, that company has former employees, and the former employees aren't under any kind of legal contract that they can't disclose certain things. You can ask them about it, right? A lot of times they'll probably have, like legal devices in place to prevent them from disclosing certain things, but it doesn't mean that you can't talk to them about other things, right? And glean a lot of information, right? I don't think it's really legal, certainly in the US or in Canada and in the EU, to have someone under contract and say, you can't say anything about what you did here for the rest of your life. Things like this. You can't talk to another living soul. I mean, if you work for the government and it's like high security type stuff, then obviously you can do that. But if you're just working in a private company, as long as you're not divulging trade secrets or something that someone would sue you over, you can talk about it, things like this. Now, you got to watch this area because you can really flip over into stuff that's basically illegal. There's all manner of things you can do here. But for example, like if you want to gauge, your competitors' production capacity, or if they're working, triple shifts, or they're a 24-hour operation, or there's one shift operation, you can find that out, right? I've never done this, but you could even hire PIs to sit outside the company and just observe and see how many people come out of the place when it closes, stuff like that, right? And then you get more sophisticated stuff, like you can have an analytics cell, you can have data scientists, behavior analysts, design engineers, things like this that can get other kind of information. Obviously, I'm talking only about legal stuff here, okay? But it's this type of activity. You look at all of this together, okay, and more so, and put it all together, you can get an idea of what your competitors are doing, what their plans are, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and a general time frame of maybe when they're releasing things, what they're working on, what their roadmap is going to be. And knowing this, you can disrupt it. If you know they're about to release something that has a killer feature or has advantages in this area, you can start a marketing campaign that sort of tells everyone that that's not really all it's cracked up to be, so you get everyone thinking like that. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, right? So the idea is that it's more defensive than offensive. You want to just make sure that they're not about to put you out of business by coming out with some killer thing that you haven't been working on. It just come out of left field, right? So if you have like an 8-person team, a little department like this reporting to the CEO, usually this costs less than a failed product cycle. You know what I mean? So it can be a form of insurance. It's there to keep your options open, maybe give you advance warning of things and do a little damage control, and also maybe spot opportunities. So that's what I would say about this. I would like to open it up to questions, and if people want to get into it, we can talk about it. I find this stuff incredibly interesting. I've done a few things with this in the past. But let's go over to you guys. Okay, Magic Beans says, question, how do you gain market share in a new market such as the EU, for example, where there already are local competitors who are more trusted? Well, I mean, that's an extremely general question. I don't know what industry you're in, I don't know what constraints there are, but I mean, to go back to basics, there are a few very fundamental business strategies. For example, there's the focus strategy, there's the differential strategy, and then there's the cost advantage strategy. So, those are the most fundamental strategies. Cost advantage, or whatever you call it, it comes with a bunch of different names. But basically, you're going to produce the product for less than your competitors, right? Now, usually you can't do that when you're small, because that usually involves economies of scale, unless you have some special technology or knowledge or something. So usually that's not available to the small players. What you have to work with if you're a small player are the other two. You have the differential strategy and you have the focus strategy. So the differential strategy is like, you're going to not try and do the same thing as the existing players. You're going to come in, you're going to gain advantage because you're trying to do something slightly different that no one is really trying to do. And you're serving the same customers, but you're giving them a slightly different thing. So you're not going head to head with the existing players that are much bigger than you. That's the idea. So for example, when Walmart came to town, like this is a common business case. Walmart comes to town and all the little mom and pop shops are all scared because it's like, how can we compete with Walmart? They can sell stuff for half the price we can sell it, and they're still making money, doing that. We can't even lower our prices that much. We'd have to be selling it at a loss to compete with them on price. So we can't go head to head, Plus they've got better selection, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Things that come with scale, right? So the mom and pop stores that survived, Walmart coming into their turf, were the ones that tried to do something different than Walmart. Walmart is known as an economy kind of thing, right? It's not a high-end brand. You don't go to Walmart to buy a luxury car, for example. You go there, like for example, bicycles. You want to buy a bicycle, you go to Walmart to buy a cheap bicycle. But if you're like someone who does the Tour de France or something, someone who, does really high-end cycling, you're not going to buy your bike at Walmart. You're going to go to a specialty bike shop where you pay $5,000 for a bike, but you get the top of the line bike, something you can't find at Walmart, right? So that's an example of the differentiation strategy. The bike shop is not trying to do the same thing as Walmart, right? So that's how you can come in and gain market share. And then later on, when you get, you get a certain amount of success, then you could maybe, if you want, you could start going downscale, selling cheaper bikes. And then now you're kind of starting to compete with Walmart more. Maybe not head to head, but you're starting to infringe upon what they're doing because you have a reputation of like, you want to buy a serious bike. You don't go to Walmart, you go here, right? So, things like that, right? That's one strategy. The focus strategy was focusing on a certain type of customer and, putting all your effort into serving that specific type of customer. So, that's something Walmart's not doing. They're trying to serve like every type of customer that's looking for something relatively cheap. They're not looking to serve, the person that does a bar that would buy a barbecue, but cares about, the finer points of how to do barbecuing. Walmart will sell you a generic barbecue. That's it. They won't have any of the accessories. They won't have the expertise. They won't provide maintenance or a tune-up on your existing barbecue. You know what I'm saying? Walmart's not doing that stuff. So if you start a barbecue store that caters perfect, like to barbecue people, and you provide everything, repair of barbecues, consultation on how to cook the best food on a barbecue, et cetera, that's how you can compete with Walmart. So that's how you can start small and you can, really carve out a niche because you're known because you focus on that type of customer specifically. I could go on, but hopefully that gets you started there. Magic Beans, where's the target large business where we're targeting large corporations, for example? Yeah. So that's how you would start. That's how you get like a toehold. So you've got like a base. They love you. They are paying your prices. They're happy to go to you. You have revenue coming in, and then you have a little surplus revenue, so you can reinvest that back in to grow your business, and then you could start making inroads into more core things that Walmart does, and you go from there. Down here you say in the FinServ industry. Okay, is that like financial services? Well, I don't work in the financial services industry in the EU, so I probably can't give you a very specific answer. But what you should do for that is you should, if you don't know already, learn how to network, learn how to connect on LinkedIn, search for the people that would know what you're trying to find out, like that are running scrappy, smaller players in the financial services industry in the EU that are growing, and do some informational interviews with them. Reach out to them and have a conversation with them. And because these people know exactly the answer to that question you're asking, because they're doing it, So that's where that information is, and you can find it out by connecting with them. Dr. Sid, 1983, it's been a while, says, we implemented some changes and we came first place once. This pleased upper management so much that they wanted us to always stay number one. Well, that's a normal thing. Our heads may fall, or heads may fall. Like heads may roll kind of thing. Team members are upset because of this. Well, congratulations, Dr. Sid. You just proved to them that it was possible. So now that they know it's possible, they want you guys to deliver, If you did it once, they're wanting you to do it again, that kind of thing. That's one of the sociological elements of being in an organization, right? If you show that you can deliver certain capabilities or certain results, that's when now people expect it of you. Whereas before, if you were playing dumb and they didn't know you could do that, they weren't demanding it of you, right? You know what I mean? But I take it from just this little paragraph that you've written. You're working in an environment where they're obviously not compensating you. They're not rewarding you with performance pay that gives you the incentive to want to do that, right? See, if they're just paying you like a flat salary or a flat wage, but they're demanding that you work harder, this is going to be the result. You're going to be not wanting to work harder, but they're going to be trying to whip you hard to get you to work harder, right? This is why performance pay is such an amazing tool. If you can implement it properly, that's where you say, listen, you've shown that this is possible. You guys got some great results. I want that again, okay? Now, if you can achieve it again, like let's agree on some numbers here, I'll give you a bonus of $10,000 if you can do that, Like you'll see your monthly or whatever biweekly paycheck get a bonus. So the number will go up by $10,000 if you can do this. Now, would that motivate you? Would you change your attitude and say like, hey, we did that once. Let's see if we can do that again. Like now we're behind this, right? So it's a win-win. Now, the reality is that maybe if what you're doing, it directly or indirectly earns the organization way more than $10,000. It earns them like $1 million or something. They can take, a portion of that, maybe even 50% of it, and use it as incentives for everybody to get everyone like to really, really want to do this again. You know what I mean? Right? So that's one way to go. But the thing is that there's it's hard to set that up, especially in union. Sorry, my printer is doing something. I didn't know what the hell that was. It sounded like some kind of buzzsaw. Anyway, you know what I mean? Like if they give those incentives, if they can set it up, great. But a lot of times there's a lot of pushback to doing that. Like especially if you're in government, that's the ultimate kind of thing that resists this. Even in large organizations, there's a lot of forces pushing back against that. Sometimes indirectly, in terms of consequences for, like you do it and you might get away with it and it works, but then there's all kinds of consequences after the fact. People now are expecting incentives for every little thing they do, and they're not going to do their job anymore, whereas they were happy doing it before, So anyway, I mean, I don't know the way around. Now, the only thing that if you're a manager, you're a functional manager, you're in charge of this, there are other forms of compensation besides just money, right? And at different levels, those take many, many different forms, right? You could simply buy people donuts or some equivalent, You could give people like time off. Like you could say you guys can quit early if you meet this goal. God, now my phone's going off. Jeez. I don't think God wants me to complete this live stream. Anyway, so, like you could just be nice to people, you could treat people like human beings. You could give them sick days or little privileges, little things that they appreciate, whatever it is that people appreciate that they would enjoy. Maybe they come in late and it's okay. No, no argument, no guilt, no getting, yelled at by the boss, like whatever. You know what I'm saying? So there's alternatives to financial compensation if your hands are tied, right? There's a lot of things you could do as an individual manager to motivate people, give them stuff they actually want. You can't give them cash. That's the problem. So anyway, I'm not sure if any of that's helpful or useful, but there you go. Magic Beans says, great insights. Thanks, Bill. Well, thank you, Magic Beans. Now I'm getting messages and all kinds of stuff. Anyway, I really need to turn off. I'm just going to turn off my ringer there. I thought I blocked everybody that I don't want to talk to. Anyway, okay, so there you go. So that's the end of questions. Anyway, in this live stream, we talked about the competitive intelligence department. I'm a big advocate of this. In organizations that don't have this, I recommend that people look into it. Obviously, you need a certain critical mass, a certain size before you can really implement it. But once you're at that size, I think it's something that people should do. I think they should make it a priority, because it's a form of insurance, and it just ensures that, you stay in your lead. You don't let a competitor outmaneuver you, and you can even gain a lot of advantages by doing this, especially if your competitors don't have this kind of activity or this kind of department. They don't have that going in their organizations. So there you go. If you want to learn business, check out that course, the $100 MBA, best bang for the buck around. It's a course I put together. It's for $100, not $100,000, for $100 US. You learn everything that you would learn in a brick and mortar MBA in university. So if that's something you're interested in doing, this is the best way to do it. Now, there's a link in the description box under this live stream to the course, and also to a video I made about the course where I answer like every question under the sun about it, how it works, what you get, all that kind of stuff. And, in the interest of being as transparent as possible. So check that out if you want to learn business. This is for people who want the knowledge. They want like the learning. Business is the scientific study of how to make money. And so, as you can appreciate, knowing that is helpful, on multiple different levels, right? If you want to manage money for a start, it really, really helps. If you're trying to succeed in your career, if you've got a corporate career, even if you work in like engineering or sales or marketing or anything like that, just be having an awareness of how business works and what works and what doesn't, and how you go about doing things. That's very advantageous. You will learn to think like your employer, but in a good way, and learn what's important to them and what's really not so important to them. That helps you climb the ladder. That helps you do the right things, that they take notice of you. And then finally, if you want to go into business for yourself, you want to do a startup or a small business, anything like that, this stuff is gold. It's handing you the lessons on a plate that normally you'd have to fail to learn. You know what I mean? Don't learn everything the hard way. Learn it from the people that have been studying business for hundreds of years. The lessons are all there in books. And if you can make someone have it come alive and read it, they can help you not only in your career, but in your life. So, check anything like that. Let me know, because, I always have a bit of a challenge trying to figure out what topic to talk about. I have no idea what people are interested in. I understand people are interested in getting a job. That's kind of what I talk about mainly on my channel. But in terms of business, what business topics people are interested in, I'm not 100% sure of that. So let me know if you have any particular ambitions or you're wondering about stuff in particular, and I will cover that. Okay, I guess we're going to, in the absence of any further questions, we're going to wind this down. I will be back in an hour from now, with a more conventional live stream where we talk about job search. So stick around for that. That live stream is called Honest HR Nitrous. It's where we talk about job search, but not the theory behind it, more of the practical side of it, what actually goes on. So I'll see you then. Check out my other courses, and it's Halloween today where I am right now. So if you're celebrating that, if that's where you are in the world, right on. It's always good to do this kind of stuff. I think Halloween's one of the cooler holidays. So hopefully you have a chance to get into that. Other than that, have yourself a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Take care.